To call this meeting, the Town of Boothbay Board of Selectmen to order. First thing on the agenda this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have public hearings. First is awards and weirs hearing, Dean E. and Anne Marie Rich, map R3, lot 25, located at 28 Mudflat Alley in Boothbay, to construct a 5-foot by 16-foot pier, a 3-foot by 38-foot ramp and runway, a 10-foot by 20-foot float, and a 30-foot hollow, 10 feet apart in Back River. Jim.
You'll see in your packets that we have a letter from the Harbor Master, Pete Ripley. The public on-site hearing was held as advertised, and Pete has gone out additionally and scoped the area, and we're not aware of any public complaints about this proposed building, and there are no navigational issues as Pete has inferred in his letter. I have a copy of the entire application, but the planning board has already acted on the building portion of this, and it's been approved. So the last thing is waiting for the Board of Selectmen's approval.
Motion to approve. Second. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the application of Dean E. and Anne Marie Rich for their pier, ramp, runway, float, and hollow in Back River. Comments, questions? Being none, all those in favor? Motion passes. Next, under public hearings, we have a public easement acceptance. The Board of Selectmen will entertain the acceptance of public easements from Bigelow Laboratories to the inhabitants of the town of Boothbay pursuant to contract zoning. Jim.
You'll see in your packets, and for anybody that's interested, I can provide additional copies. Pursuant to the contract zone with Bigelow, there was some discussion about public easements for trails, and that the public easement for trails would be granted before the certificate of occupancy. We took that language and extrapolated a little bit that the certificate of occupancy didn't make any sense as a timeline for building A, and that any certificate of occupancy could be deemed when the public easement was granted. So through discussion with Consigli and Dr. Shamil, we decided to aim for building C because there's blasting involved, and we didn't really want to promote public trails, hiking, and blasting. So in your packet, you'll see the final easement deed, which we have Dr. Shamil's signature. We've received consents from all the mortgagees, and I sent along an additional digital of the map because it's really hard to see when you shrink it down to 8.5 by 11. Sally has reviewed all of this material and gives us her blessing. So the last thing is that the Board of Selectmen needs to accept this public easement, and when the Board of Selectmen accepts the public easement, then those will be public trails.
Since this is part of the contract zone between Bigelow Labs and the town of Boothbay, this does not need to be approved at town meeting?
Sally and I discussed this because the contract zone and the language in the contract zone has been approved by town meeting, that it infers that the Board of Selectmen has the authority to accept this easement. Ordinarily, acceptance of property of this magnitude you'd want to take to town meeting, but since it's already written into the contract zone as a condition that needs to be done, we feel like the Board of Selectmen has this authority.
Make the motion to accept the easement from Bigelow.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded to accept the public easement from Bigelow Laboratories. Questions or comments?
One question, just is building C complete?
Essentially, it is complete. Yes, we're just in the process of doing the certificate of occupancy.
That's fine, I was just curious, because I was like, or is this contingent on when building C is complete, then they can use the trail?
No,
Okay.
it essentially is complete.
We tried to put a little foresight into when we were doing the certificate of occupancy in building B and said, let's prepare these easements for building C, and we knew the timeline, and if anything, Bigelow has held that timeline pretty well.
No, I'm not complaining, I think it's wonderful, and it makes sense, I mean, there's no sense to have people walking down there during heavy, construction equipment moving around and obviously blasting. I got it.
The largest obstacle in front of the certificate of occupancy is the public easement. Most of the other things that I identified in the pre-inspection were small issues which considerably in the town of Boothbay and Bigelow have worked out in every single building. They're actually getting pretty good at inspecting large buildings.
A couple of questions around the easements. Have the trails been built?
By and large, mostly, you can see, maybe it's difficult to see all the detail on the map, but essentially there is existing trails, there is some rerouting of trails to avoid the actual buildings, and those are in place now. And then there are a couple of places where we propose, and thanks Marty, adjoining link trails in order to create a circuit. So those are not complete yet, but the trails as per the original plans are essentially.
When do you feel that they will be complete?
Probably in the spring, I think, realistically. I mean, people are free to sort of try and navigate between the trails and do a bit of bushwhacking if they like that. I can.
Oh, this is much more clear than what you have in your package.
Yeah, I mean, I can point those out to you if you like. But
Another question along the trails, who's responsible for maintaining them?
And that's a discussion that we'll have a little bit as we go on. Some of the stewardship is going to be, Bigelow is going to take primary role in some of the stewardship of the lands. But you can see where the trails go beyond their property, and you don't want the trails to taper off in their maintenance. So it's probably take a community effort, and that's why you see the Trails Partnership is here. They've advised the town when we get to this moment on acceptance of the trails. But there's multiple property owners when you talk about the entire length of the trail system. Just a portion of this is Bigelow's.
I hate to say it, Jim, you just made me a little more uncomfortable. If we're gonna be accepting anything, all the details should be worked out before we accept it. And if we haven't worked out who's gonna be maintaining these trails, since the easement is gonna be in the name of the inhabitants of the town of Boothbay, that would lead me to believe that the town of Boothbay is responsible. If that's not the case, we need to iron that out before we accept it.
It's not the town of Boothbay's property, it will have a shared interest in this as the easement. And I'm pretty sure that Bigelow is.
yes, I mean, the trails that exist on our property, of course, that we are responsible for ensuring that those are accessible and safe in terms of pre-falls. But we can't make the connections beyond that property.
Is that in writing?
The maintenance of the trails?
Yes.
I think it was the
Yeah,
original contract zoning
I think that
agreement.
whenever I've seen that, and I just say Mary Neal from the Boothbay Region Community Trail Partnership, I think that Bigelow has actually stepped up to the plate and gone really beyond what we ask, and considering making some loops, and they've made some more accessible areas. And they do plan, I think, in their documents to maintain trails on their property. And what Graham and Jim are both alluding to is, in the future, if we can get other property owners to help to expand access, which is all in the future, but Bigelow's obviously wouldn't be responsible for being able to walk, continuing on down toward the southern areas toward the Lincoln Bay Preserve or the Burley Preserve. That's a hope, but that will take time, and the Trail Partnership, as it's been doing for the past 4 or 5 years, continue to work on that. But Bigelow would be maintaining their own trails, and they've actually improved that system on their own.
And I understand that, Mary, but unfortunately, those of us in this room will always be around.
Right.
And I want to make sure that anything that the town of Boothbay accepts, it'll be that way 50 to 100 years from now. And
The contract zone is as as a definitive arrangement as
The
any.
contract zone is, and us accepting these trails is as well, but if for some reason in the future, God knows what the future holds, if Bigelow decides they don't want to maintain those trails anymore, who's on the hook?
Well, they're obligated by the contract zone, which is law, which is a higher level than you'd ordinarily have with a trails easement like this. Just the acceptance of the trails easement is prescribed through the certificate of occupancy method. So we've already really taken care of the maintenance in the contract zone, and this is the acceptance of the easement. And
If you have, then I'm happy.
The zoning agreement also makes provision for a couple of car parking spaces and information boards as well.
Right.
That's part of the zoning agreement.
Yeah, there's a spot, there has to be one, is it one parking? or
There's two.
Two parking spots maintained so people can use the trails. I mean, that's in the law, the zoning ordinance. What else were we gonna?
Just information, you know.
Oh, that's
obviously
right, the
the
kiosk.
actual kiosk, you know, with the maps and the photocopies for people to use.
Okay.
So-
Yeah, if all that's been covered, then I'm satisfied. Any others? Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And thank you to the Trails Group for helping us. Since the zoning ordinance was created and adopted prior to me getting here, that's why we brought the Trails Partnership in. They've been around for significant more years than I have, and they helped us understand what trails existed prior to Bigelow getting there, what trails were kind of inferred to be created, and so that's why Mary Neal's here. We appreciate the help.
Look forward to welcoming everyone to walk the trails.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Next on the agenda, approve the minutes of the previous meeting from 10/8/2012. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the minutes. Comments or corrections? Being none, all those in favor? Motion passes. Public comment? No. Reports?
The majority of our meeting is reports. So hopefully we can fly right through, but I think we'll get stuck. November 6th is election day. If nobody's noticed, there's a significant election on November 6th. Yeah, I think everybody's noticed. The absentee ballots are available. Several people have started voting. I think we've already issued over 300 absentee ballots and probably received more than 200 back. And really, there's 2 weeks left to go. So that's a pretty good start at election time. The Elder Appreciation, the 12th Annual Elder Appreciation Day is at the Boothbay Region Elementary School. That's Saturday, October 22nd from 10 to 2. I made sure that I would mention Elder Appreciation in my reports. I've actually had it in my queue to mention for a while, but we didn't want to mention it too early and have it not get the recognition that it deserves. The St. Andrews Task Force has been meeting every Tuesday at 7 p.m. The latest events in the St. Andrews Task Force have been pretty well illustrated in the Boothbay Register and on Channel 7. We've had good coverage from those two entities. Chuck is the chairman of the task force. Would you like to add anything to the task force?
Well, I can say that the interest in the community is still extremely high. Whenever we're having a meeting here, the room is packed. The volunteers are extremely energized and are extremely hopeful that something can be worked out. And we're just gonna keep working with the work groups and hopefully something positive can come out of this.
The biggest thing that I would point out is I don't like to cloud our business meetings, which these are, with task force updates, because I know everybody's staying in tune as much as they feel is appropriate. But within 3 months, the task force has created sensible counter-arguments and different perspectives that the town of Boothbay in itself would not be able to provide without the work of lots of volunteers. So that's the crown and achievement of the task force. With that said, I can move on if nobody has any questions.
I just think this, excuse me, a lot of them should be commended. Some of them's putting an awful lot of work.
I agree, and some of them are easily identifiable, like Andrew Twaddle, and Freddie Luke, and Peggy Powis, all four of the task force members. Peggy Pinkham, there a lot of them are very identifiable, but it's the people that show up every single day and don't stick out in that significant way that are adding very important pieces. It's definitely been a lesson in community involvement for me.
There are dozens of people working behind the scenes that you may not see them, but they're there studying data or researching or checking articles and bringing all that information back, and Peggy and her group separate it all out, disperse it where it needs to go. It's amazing what they've been able to accomplish.
Welcome to the Boothbay region.
Amen.
Yes.
That's the moral.
And probably the largest and probably most talked about subject is next on our list. So the Boothbay Region Ambulance Service puts together their budget committee, which Dale is our appointment on their budget committee, and I can imagine that's probably why Robbie's here tonight. And then Friday, when I got the rough draft of the ambulance service budget, I put out my own email of analysis how this affects the town of Boothbay. Obviously, their budget is significantly larger than it has been in years past, and I wanted to put in perspective what forecasted impacts that would have to the municipality. So this is an increase of 549% in the subsidy that we paid last year. That would essentially mean, based on this year's commitment data, an increase of 0.16 mils, so 16 cents on the dollar, just in ambulance service. Now, I try to put that in perspective for the average taxpayer, and we use the $100,000 home in perspective. And I hate the $100,000 home. And why do I say that? Because nobody owns the $100,000 home. It's just a simple mathematical way for people to figure out, do I own a home that's worth more or worth less and have more significance? Obviously, for the $100,000 home, that's a $16 increase in your taxes for ambulance services. But the median value of a home in Lincoln County is $206,000. So that's $33 increase in taxes. Another perspective, since you usually like to use percentages, it's a 2.1 increase in tax in the tax bill. The last hitch, which I think is probably the most significant and most important, is that 1/4 of the proposed budget is in fiscal year 2013. Since this anticipated service closure happens in this fiscal year, in this current fiscal year, we'll need to raise and appropriate $38,000 more than what we've committed through taxes. In order to do that, a special town meeting would be necessary, and then the question becomes, what are you asking the voters to take that $38,000 from the undesignated fund, which we've had lots of discussion about the undesignated fund in the last year, or to do a special assessment, and special assessments are also very expensive. And my estimation is probably about $8,000 to $10,000 more to do a special assessment, issue taxes, and receive them. That's the summation. I know there'll be questions.
Well, the two options that you just tossed out there, a special town meeting, a special assessment, or taking it from undesignated. I hate to ask the question, Robbie, but can you guys take out a note until we can get taxes in?
I don't know if it can I think we can, I think that the town can, but I don't know how that affects the following year's budgets. Because now you're taking funds from one fiscal year, transferring them to another year.
I think what he's saying though is, if Boothbay's portion was 40 grand, just,
Right.
I don't know what, I forget what that was.
That's
but-
We
Okay,
estimated
so,
it as 38.
so 40,000 for a round number. You're saying to take out a loan for 40,000 and include it into next year's assessment for the town of Boothbay.
Which
as
is
well
what I'm
as
assuming
what
Jim
we
has done when he gave us the figure that went up
No.
to 187. That's on top of the 187 that we'd be paying?
No.
So we'd be paying 220?
No, the $38,000 is a one-quarter expense. So what we take is the entire next year's fiscal year ambulance service, subtract out what we have already been approved to pay, and quarter that up. So that's $38,000.
On top of.
On
next
top
year's.
of, on top of next year's.
No, on
No.
top of what you've already paid.
On top of what we plan to pay this year.
For this year.
Yeah, but what Chucky's
The number that
right
you gave
though.
us for fiscal year 14, does that include fourth quarter fiscal year 2013?
No. And matter of fact, I'd say that's an audited nightmare. The town is not allowed to spend monies in this fiscal year and appropriate next fiscal year.
Well, I
So,
wasn't saying that the town would spend money. I was asking if the ambulance service could float a note.
right.
I had assumed when I saw that huge number that quarter four for fiscal year 2013 was included in that 2014
Oh, no.
number. So we'd actually need to come up with $220,000 if you add in quarter four for 2013 and all of 2014.
Yeah. And I'm looking at this in fiscal year chunks. You're absolutely right. But the problem is the authority that the town of Boothbay has this year is we have authority from town meeting to expend $34,205 for this service. If we expend any more than that, then we need to look at the legal recourse there.
I could get real negative here real quick, so I'm gonna watch.
I understand, this is a very complicated question.
And I totally feel for the ambulance service. This is none of their doing, and they're a fine service, and we need them. A lot of people have been saying that what's going on in the region is gonna save us money. I guess we're starting to see the tip of the iceberg where it doesn't. In fact, when we had the Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission meeting, I think one gentleman talked about a shift of
It's a
the
cost.
costs, and we're really starting to see a shift of the cost. I mean, if it costs more to maintain 27, so it's clear so that the ambulances can get to Damascotta in the wintertime, we're seeing a shift of the costs right now from an emergency room department to the taxpayers to fund the ambulance, so they can still get to Damascotta.
We are working with Lincoln County Healthcare. They have come forward and they are making a big step to try to help ease this burden on the towns. It can't be reflected here because it hasn't been finalized. But we have been both, in my opinion, holding the towns back, saying we don't have this information yet. We've been holding the task force back. We've been holding Lincoln County Healthcare back, saying we haven't put this information together. So finally, we got our head around the numbers enough that we could meet with our budget committee members, which we felt the towns are the first people that should have been notified. So we met with Dale and Jerry Gamage and Palmer Payne from Southport last Thursday night, and I think it was Thursday night. We felt that was the way to start this. But I will say that Lincoln County Healthcare has made an unofficial proposal and is trying to help this burden. We just don't know all the ins and outs of it, and it's not ready to go public yet.
Reading the article today on the Boothbay Register's website that Sue Mello just did, Scott is quoted as saying that Lincoln County Health may not be able to help you financially.
That's the part of it that we're trying to straighten out is, there are some laws that govern Medicare billing and how different organizations that bill Medicare, how they operate, just like the laws that the towns operate are different than regular businesses. So we're working through that. Maine Health's attorney group is working on it, and we've got an attorney that does Medicare billing compliance working on it. So we are working through that. It's just that this had to come out, and unfortunately, by getting it out early, because everybody wants it, this is what has to come out. This is probably worst case information. And just while we're here, the biggest driver of this, when you get a chance to look through that, is payroll. It's based on 2 paramedic crews full-time during the day, which now we have 1 full-time and 1 10 hours. And it's based on 2 crews at night, 1 full-time, full-paid crew, which we don't run now, and then a second backup crew. Our night crews work at a per diem call-in rate, and we feel that the level of call volume that this is going to generate at night, it's not going to allow me to do call at night and then go to work the next day. So we're going to have to pay full-time wages at night. So we've increased the day crews a certain extent, and we've increased the night crews to cover this. The smaller piece, it's not insignificant, but the smaller piece of that is the unknown transfer revenue that we're going to lose. We're expecting to lose some. We've got some numbers from Lincoln County Healthcare for what they feel the transfer is going out of Miles that we will be taking will be. And we've got some numbers that we feel that they'll be, and we've come up with a happy medium there to put in the budget, because we obviously don't want to cut ourselves short on the revenue side. So I think that this is going to go out a little bit as shock and awe, but I do think that there's going to be updates that go with this. Talked to some people in the Brunswick area over the weekend, and when when Bath Memorial closed, they found a way to contribute to Bath Rescue and some of the other. They found a way to do this without infringing on the Medicare laws. So there was some positive that came out of that that hopefully this can. But it's basically a one-time agreement. It's going to start out this year with a certain dollar figure, and then it's going to drop off. And once we're sure that we can either accept or not accept this money, then we'll get into final negotiations with Lincoln County Healthcare and final arrangements. And once we have dollar figures proposed, we're going to take that back to our budget committee for approval. It's not up to us, I don't think, to approve that money, because it directly, in the long term, it directly affects the taxpayer. So I think just like the budget committee approves what we come to the towns for and what our budget is, I think they should approve and have some say in how we receive monies from other sources to offset the tax burden. So I'll say it's not as bad as it sounds and as bad as it looks on this piece of paper, but we just had to do this and get it out in the open so that we can move forward, so.
I have to say, Robbie, I hope it's not as bad as it looks, because it looks awful. And like I said, it's no reflection on you guys. This has nothing to do with you guys, other than the fact that you guys are left to pick up the pieces and give us the service that you're used to giving us.
Yeah, it's taking a part-time organization and turning it into a full-time organization.
A full-time organization doing this, the scale of the services that are proposed for post-April 1, that's a pretty good deal.
And that includes only 2 people with health insurance. All the other employees that are on the salary line item are per diem employees. So we have the 2 management people are the only people that get health insurance at this point. So there's no retirement, there's no health insurance, there's no vacation figured into that. So that's a pretty
bare bones.
It's a pretty bare bones salary line item, even though it looks as big as it does.
What's the next nearest ambulance service that would cover an area this size? CLC?
Yeah, CLC is a little bit bigger than we are. They cover 8 towns, I believe, but most all of their towns have first responders. So their response times are longer to the scene and obviously back to the hospital. They're kind of in the same position we are now, as they're a mile from, their station is a mile from St. Andrews. From Miles. So their turnaround, when they get to the hospital and take the patient out of the ambulance, they're in their coverage area and they're ready to do a call. And that's gonna be the huge difference for us. Is the only time that doesn't happen now is if we go to Miles or Mid-Coast or Main Med or wherever. All these local emergency calls that we take to St. Andrews, the minute we put sheets back on the cot and clean the back of the ambulance, at St. Andrews, we're in service. And many times we kind of throw everything in and go. That's not something that we're gonna be able to do for Miles.
No. I was thinking the further ends of their peninsulas down on Bristol, South Bristol.
Yeah, they do have, they have about similar transport times to some of their areas. But again, they have a distance, they have a transport time to get there, a response time to get to the scene, and they have first responder services that help them with that. And I know on the Bristol Peninsula, the ambulance, or the first responder group down there, they have an ambulance, and they will start up the peninsula depending on how severe the injury or how injured the patient is. So that's a little bit different than where we're at here. Is, we're trying to cover the whole peninsula and get the patients off the peninsula and then be back here in service. Where when CLC, they may go down to Bristol and come back just to Miles, but as soon as they get that patient out of the ambulance at Miles. But in scale to scale, I'm pretty sure CLC has 3 full-time day crews and 2 full-time night crews. So they're that much bigger again than we are that way.
Now, why do I advance this information to the Board of Selectmen in the method that I did? It is my job to make sure that you guys are kept abreast of forecasting that may impact the budget for the next year, and we're starting to walk into the budget for next year. But the more important part is quarter 4 of this fiscal year. You need to have a little bit of forethought in how we're going to have that money available if it is indeed $38,000 in the last quarter of this fiscal year. If you're going to do a supplemental tax, which I completely am against, to spend $10,000 to raise $40,000 is ludicrous. You'd have to advance plan that because you need a vote, and then you need to issue taxes. You need to give enough time for those taxes to be received and enough time to make that payment. So it would be more likely that you would take and ask a question to take money from undesignated fund, which in our case is much more complicated than it usually is. So that's why I advance this information to the Board of Selectmen, is because we need to be kept very close to this issue to make sure that we're prepared in case we need $38,000 for the last quarter of this fiscal year. And one last statement is the one thing that you learn in public administration is progressivity and regressivity in taxes. Progressive taxes are taxes that are applied to people that use the services more, pay more for the services. Going to St. Andrews Hospital is not a tax, but the more you use it, the more you pay for it. Now, if property owners are paying for the services that used to be paid for through St. Andrews Hospital costs, are now paying through their property taxes, that is regressivity in taxes, severe regressivity in taxes. And I just have to make that point. I didn't spend that many years in college to try to learn those phrases and not apply them.
Careful, Jim. You're going to be called negative.
I used very technical terminology there.
I I would like to put out, just because I'm sitting on that board, the budget committee, the ambulance is working very hard for the town's benefits, all towns, all 3 towns. And I want to make that very clear, there's no doubt. I feel like I'm handcuffed up here because I know some of the figures and some of the things that are being remained confidential. So I'm sitting out here chafing, wanting to vent, and I can't. But there are things in motion, I guess I could say, that may be beneficial to the towns. I don't know how beneficial, I will throw that out, but certainly any benefit at this point in time would be nice.
I can say, and I realize all that, and I hope the ambulance service is able to work out something. I can say though, having been at the task force meetings and hearing explanations as they've been given, the explanations went from helping out the ambulance service to helping them in the transition. That's concerning. If they've since reversed course again and are looking at a longer term, that pleases me greatly, and I'm sure it'll please a lot of people. But I still think that the best thing we could do is keep the emergency room down here and not have to worry about all this.
In 5 to 10 years, ambulance service will not get cheaper. I don't think the ambulance service would say that. So if the support that St. Andrew's Hospital has offered, which I don't know the specifics of, don't last beyond 5 to 10 years, then that's something to contemplate. I already talked more about this than anybody probably felt comfortable. Right?
Anything else? Comp plan.
Comprehensive Planning Committee, as you saw from the RFP that I brought to you at the last meeting, has gotten a little more traction back. The next, a week from tonight, on the 29th, the Comprehensive Planning Committee will be having a non-mandatory pre-meeting with any consultants that are interested in putting in a proposal. And then those proposals will be due by November 20th. And what we anticipate, the Comprehensive Planning Committee, is to review those proposals and hopefully have a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for the 10th of December, and then start contract negotiation. Since all of that discussion happened at the comp plan meeting, I wanted to make sure that I reported back to the Board of Selectmen. Chuck, as always, you're the chair of that committee. Would you like to add anything?
Well, I was just gonna ask you if you've heard back from any of them yet.
I've only heard back from Bob Fonts and Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission. They're not sure that they will have the manpower to do a proposal, but they're contemplating it right now. Continuing on, if there's no questions. Board of Appeals meeting is November 1st at 6 p.m. That hasn't gone without recognition that that's impending as well. The town is prepared for the appeals meeting. The Board of Appeals has received all the information that they need. We bought them all brand new Board of Appeals manuals to make sure that it's been a while since they met. I wanted to give them the most ammunition to be successful in their appeal, because a good appeal is good for the town, no matter what the decision.
And that appeal time is 6 o'clock?
6 p.m.
Good, so that's right after the Lincoln County Healthcare meeting.
Which we'll get into timeline discussion. We're gonna have to figure out some dates, and that's why I got that on budget timeline.
Is the Board of Appeals meeting concerning only Stinson Marine?
That's the only appeal filed. And I think by practice, we would probably only give the Board of Appeals one review to do it in evening anyway. It's probably gonna be hard enough to do one. And it is the first time the Board of Appeals has met since I've been here, so they don't often get appeals. Department head reports. So the department heads met in my office earlier today. And as we discussed, we're doing a safety review of Public Works, where me and another member of our department, well, Lori, is going to help me do a safety review, and we're going to do that. Every quarterly, there will be a safety review to make sure that we stay current on our safety policies. Public Works has been doing a lot of trimming and chipping on back narrows. a culvert on Adams Pond. And I'm not sure if anybody's been down to the access road, no reason to go down there in October, but that they're putting in a facility down there similar to the one that they have at the playground. And we've been discussing with the water district how we place that and what would be best for the water. As Knickerbocker Lake gets more and more access from the access road, facilities are necessary. And one of the things that I wanted to report on, we got a sizable loader repair bill just recently. And I just wanted to show the board an example of how we change our policy depending on things that happen. No longer will our loader be used in transport to and from across town. It is, we didn't put in actual formal policy, but it has been a directive between me and Mike that we will now trailer the loader for transport across town.
Hadn't that discussion happened, or did that happen before you got here?
That was before you got here.
Yeah.
Okay.
The powertrain on the loader is pretty bad, but that's not the reason why it went into the shop. It had some electrical issues, but the bill on that is sizable. I'm not sure if it's in this warrant or may not even be a finalized bill yet. The plows are pretty much put together. There's a couple of blades that we haven't replaced because they don't want to replace them prematurely. But all this winter sand is put up and our public works is relatively prepared for winter. I know nobody wants to hear that.
And just remember, last year, the first snowstorm was October 30th.
I remember. I do remember. I remember the year before where it seemed like it snowed all winter too. In assessing, all the adjustments have been made and some of the abatements are still pending that we've been discussing in previous meetings. Assessing is working on some mandatory reports as far as tree growth and turnaround documents. All of the photos have been uploaded, but we do have a question out to Vision of when that merge between the pictures that we have on site and the pictures that they have at their site are synced together. We haven't figured that out yet. And then O'Donnell and Associates is still working on a mapping proposal that we've discussed earlier. And I kind of wanted to give some clarity because we discussed it in the department heads meetings. O'Donnell and Associates showed us their mapping that they do for New Gloucester, which is their base town. They're based out of New Gloucester. And they take their entire database for tax mapping and lay it over a Google Earth. And then you can add layers in. It's like a poor man's GIS. It's absolutely amazing, and I can't wait until we have the proposal to show the Board of Selectmen what we're talking about. But you can add in other things since it's just a simple database laying over ortho imagery, is that you can add in things like road dimensions. You can add in, we could take that information, and I know the water district used GIS, we could take that information and upload it into another GIS system. It's not as expensive as it sounds, so don't let me scare you, but we'll wait till that proposal is ready.
Zoning maps?
That's where we're going. Essentially, we want to have the mapping like we have online right now, where we have the zone map, and then we have your parcels, and you can figure it all out if you can put them all. We want to just lay them over one another, so you can click on and say, here's the zone. Oh, there's my property in the zone, and then maybe someday in the future reference to the zone, to the ordinance, so that you can figure this all out online. If we can, the more services we provide online, the less we have people answering the phone and giving out information. People can help themselves. Cuts down on the cost of services. I can't wait. I'm excited. This is good stuff. And think about the Google Earth things that you use in general practice. If I want to measure how far it is from my house to my friend's house, I just use the ruler and click it out. You could do that stuff with your own property tax information now. So when you're applying to put a shed, do I have the proper setbacks? You can measure it yourself without going out and actually physically measuring it. Code enforcement, obviously prepping for the Board of Appeals, which we've mandated to all staff at the Board of Appeals, whether they're necessary or not, they'll be there. It's good learning opportunity for our code enforcement. One of the key things that they're working on is a site on Matthews Road which has a failing septic. I wanted to highlight this without obviously talking about the names involved, but a septic has failed, and rather than a notice of violation and automatic stop use on that septic field, we've been working with that property owner as long as they're not putting effluent into the field itself, they're still allowed to use the tank as a holding tank until they can have replacement. And that's allowed us to explore some funding with rural development, and hopefully that gets a little more traction here shortly. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this, but I am significantly proud of it, but Dan Breyer is completely LPI certified, and if I haven't said that at one point in time, I apologize, because Dan deserves a lot of credit for the test that he took in an accelerated timeline. And I think he's prepared to take the final 2 certification tests that he has. We sent the entire code enforcement team to erosion control plan just recently. We sent Mike Alley, our public works foreman, along as well. It was a really good training session. Some of the new things that our code enforcement has come up with is you guys might understand the 30% expansion rule for shoreland zoning, but as of the time when they developed shoreline zoning, you have 30% expansion of your house that you can build up to. And how do we keep track of that? Well, it's recorded in the registry of deeds, but if you apply for 15% this year and then 5% 10 years from now and 5% more a few years, it becomes hard and cumbersome for us to keep track of, are you up to your 30% now? So Dan, Lori, and Art developed a simple sheet that we're going to have registered at the Registry of Deeds. The first attempt was a little interesting, but essentially we'll be able to refer back to that sheet in simple order to make sure that nobody has expanded beyond that rule. The business office is extremely tasked with getting prepared for the November 6th election. We plan on putting out a notice to the public that we're going to close the business office on November 6th for regular functions. So motor vehicles, hunting, fishing licenses, all of those things, the business office will be closed in order to make sure that both our registrar of voters and our clerk are available, and then Amber will also be cross-training in both of those. One last reminder to people, foreclosure notices, and there are 55 foreclosure notices go out shortly, and those foreclosures take automatic effect in December. If you're one of those 55 and you know you are, contact the town of Boothbay and see if we can work something out so that your property is not automatically foreclosed. That's very important. That's department head.
Can we go back to closing the business office on November 6th?
Yes, sir.
Well, I realize that it's convenient for us because we're expecting a large volume of people. It's not really convenient for the public if they want to take care of business while they're here voting, if we have the business office closed. I'm a little concerned about that.
Yeah, we're just not staffed appropriately. Our backup for the business office would ordinarily be Sherry, and you see the chair's not here tonight. She's out for medical reasons. So it leaves me, and essentially I'm halfway decent at some business office, and I might stick around and try to do as much as I can, but we want to let the public know that those services aren't available. And then if somebody comes with a simple motor vehicle, then I might be able to help them, but we don't want them to come in with expectations that we have a full range of services.
Budget time now.
And so, as promised and as usual, I put together a timeline for fiscal year 2014 budget. This is the same template that I've given every single year, the third year straight of budget preparation. There's one typo in November 2012. We'll do discussion with department heads on fiscal year 2014 requests and not 2013. But we're underway. I've already started my budget process, and in order, we set up this timeline so that we can meet these goals and have our budget delivered in appropriate time. Seemed to work last year. We had plenty of time. And if there are any questions, a lot of this is counting backwards, taking the date that annual town meeting will be and figuring out 30 days prior, 45 days prior, and 85 days prior. So it's just a standard practice that I'll do every single year. It's helpful to me too.
So we'd see the first draft on or about 1/7.
Yep. And we do that on purpose. Gives me the holidays to finish my final edits, and doesn't cloud up the public process of developing a budget timeline. So that's when I anticipate it.
Okay. Any questions about reports? No old business, no new business, public comment? No. All right. I'll entertain a motion to review the warrants and sign them.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? I'll also entertain a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056A to discuss personnel matters. Second. All those in favor? Motion passes.
I didn't get who made the motion for warrants and sign, 1 and 2? I'm sorry, you guys don't even know what I'm talking about. I give you guys numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I gotta take notes faster. Oh, and now we're gonna go into performance evaluation.
Thing 1, thing 2, that's a power jet and a forklift. This door.
Oh, this doesn't have
Too
to be
late.
done
Not
officially.
to return to regular session?
Right, not to return to regular session.
Right, are we gonna have a regular meeting on the 12th?
12th is our regular meeting.
Oh, right. Yeah. I don't care.
Makes no difference to me.
What do you see for an agenda?
The 12th? Right now, like I put in your boxes, acceptance of the bike ped plan, nothing we can't postpone until the 10th.
I think we ought to play it by ear and see what happens.
Okay,
Nothing we can't postpone until when?
the December, the
November.
26th, November 26th.
That would be it. Thanks, Sue. Unless the Stimson thing comes up and needs an action or something, you know what I mean?
Right, and I don't anticipate you having an action
Okay.
necessary by the 12th.
Good.
But if we do, we can make sure that that's,
Yeah.
so,
I would say postpone the meeting until the 26th unless an emergency arises.
Then we just do it the 13th, which is Tuesday.
No,
okay.
You want to do it the 12th?
I can't do it the 13th. I have a task force meeting that night.